Hello, everyone. You're listening to For Those We Lost. I'm your host, Jennifer Sullivan. Thank you for being here. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, forthosewelostpodcast.com, and click on the contact button, and you can reach me that way as well. In this show, people share their stories of losing a loved one to COVID. Every story you hear in this show is full of heartbreak, grief, loss, and frustration, but they are also full of love and hope. We talk about how we are coping, we talk about how to keep the memory of our loved ones alive, and how isolating our grief is as the world wants to move on. You'll hear us talk a little bit about the vaccine and politics, and you may not agree, but I hope you'll keep listening because each person who shares their story on this show has experienced profound grief over the loss of a loved one. And that's something we will all experience. We all love someone, we will all lose someone we love, and we will all grieve. These are the stories of those we lost to COVID. Thanks for being here with me today. I've got a really great show coming up for you. Today, I'll be talking with Bari in Pennsylvania. She lost her mother in April of 2020. When Bari's mom first entered the hospital with COVID, she went online and tried to find help. She made connections with a lot of people that way, but one thing she realized after her mom passed away was that there were no support groups at that time for people who'd lost someone to COVID. So she started a support group, and as she describes it, they are a small group, but when a new member is welcomed in, they are welcomed as part of the family. For context, we recorded this episode on October 11th, 2021. Bari's support group for COVID loss is called In Loving Memory 19, and they can be found on Facebook and Instagram. That information is in the show notes for this episode. Bari also wanted to mention that her daughter Jocelyn designed the logo for In Loving Memory 19. She remembered after we'd finished recording, so I promised her I would mention it here. Bari's mom's name was Rose Phillips, and I love that she says her name out loud in this episode. When we tell their stories, we keep the memories of our loved ones alive. And with that, I'd like to welcome Bari to the show. Thank you for being here with me today.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So I guess what I'd like to do, I know we talked on the phone and you told me about your mom. And what I'd like to do is have you start with her story, because I know she battled breast cancer for a long time and got a miraculous diagnosis and recovery from that. And then COVID happened in March of 2020. So if you just want to start there, I think that would be great.
Sure. So my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. She was diagnosed at stage 4, and she battled stage 4 for approximately 10 years.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow.
which in itself is unheard of, because usually that's not the case, unfortunately. When she got diagnosed, she was not going to do treatment. She pretty much was just going to give up, was not even going to notify me of her diagnosis. Just being the strong woman that she was just, going to take it and kind of just roll the dice, so to speak. My, I guess you would call her my grandmother-in-law, called her on the phone once I found out that she had been diagnosed and told her, you're going to do treatment. You're not going to do that to your granddaughter. And that's it. And hung up on her. And she said, okay, I guess I'm doing treatment. She's never spoken to me that way before. And okay. So she pretty much had no choice. She did chemotherapy. She did radiation. After that, she did, hormone therapy, and she survived miraculously for 10 years. And, when I would say 2019, I was at work, got a phone call from my mom telling me that she was in remission. And I did not believe her. I thought, okay, this is you once again trying to not have me worry. You're just going to tell me this so that I stop worrying. And I was like, yeah, okay, right. Well, if you don't believe me, you can call the doctor yourself. What do you think I'm going to do? So I called him on his cell phone, as any good child would do. And he said, Bari, look, I don't know what to tell you. I don't understand it myself. I took her test results and reviewed them, and I don't understand it, but she's telling you the truth.
Wow.
Okay. And I'm just in shock, but now I'm hearing it from two people, one of which I, have to believe. And then several months later, she had another PET scan, because even though I believed it, it was okay, maybe it's a fluke. Mm-hmm. And several months later has another PET scan, and we get the same exact results. So at this point, sending praises up, going, okay, I finally have my miracle. This is what we have been hoping for 10 years. This is our miracle. Mm-hmm. And then COVID happens.
Yeah.
And that just kind of swept us off our feet. I don't even know. I don't even know what the words are, because as horrible as it sounds, after her battling cancer for 10 years, I always, in the back of my head, somewhat prepared myself for my mom passing from cancer. Mm-hmm. She battled it for 10 years. Had she passed from cancer, not that I wanted my mom to pass by any means, but I could have processed it better. And then to have the reprieve, to have her go into remission, to get that blessing, to get that, oh my goodness, yeah, things are going to be okay. And then have that ripped from us. There's no words. And left with, okay, now what do we do? How do we process that? Because there is no way to process that.
Yeah.
And, I saw her. I, fortunately, unfortunately saw her. And I still, 18 months later, can't process it. Mm-hmm.
So where was she when the pandemic started?
When the pandemic started, she was in a nursing home. The reason that she lived in a nursing home was because of the cancer diagnosis. So my mom had all her faculties about her, unbelievably, to a default, had her faculties about her. She was residing in a nursing home because from lymphedema, she had difficulty getting around. And in the apartment that she had currently been living in, I could not get her support in her apartment. I had actually taken my concerns all the way up to Harrisburg and stated, why can't I get her support in her apartment? I need somebody there to support her to make sure she's okay. She's had several falls. I just need someone to check in on her to make sure she's okay. And I could not get someone to do this. So I had to make the unfortunate decision to put, at that time, my mom in a nursing home for her to get the support that she needed. My mom, who was a strong, very independent woman who did not break easily, when I told her I had to make that decision, I watched her cry. And I said, Mom, I don't know what else to do because I cannot get you the support that you need. I don't know what to do. And the stipulation for her staying in the nursing home was that I had to get her into the nursing home where she was at currently for rehab. That was the only one that she would stay at, which is where she ended up staying. She ended up staying. I was able to get her in there. And she did well there and she made friends there. But that's why she was there, because of the lymphedema, because of a mobility issue.
Yeah.
And then COVID happened and I saw her in March and we had a whole conversation about COVID and right before the shutdown. And we talked about, Mom, things are getting bad because, at that point, I didn't know anyone that had passed from COVID. I didn't know anybody that had contracted COVID. It was just like everybody else, you're seeing it on the news and you're seeing how bad things were getting, but it had not personally affected me.
Mm-hmm.
Mom, things are getting bad. People really need to be safe. Yeah. Mom, I'm telling you, it's really getting serious. People need to be wearing masks. Yeah. You're just really serious about this. You're just very sensitive because of the student population you work with. Mom, I'm telling you, people are dying from COVID. And my mom and I are having a conversation in the nursing room, and I can remember in her room, and I can remember vividly, a nurse walked in while this conversation's going on, and they're kind of like chuckling about it. And my mom's like, COVID schmovid. COVID schmovid. So, COVID schmovid took her life.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you have window visits with her and FaceTime and all of that? And then what happened and how did she end up getting COVID?
So she was living, like I said, in the nursing home. And in April, I got a phone call from one of the staff at the nursing home who was very close with myself and my mom. And the shutdown had already occurred at this point. And she calls me and she's on my cell and she's from her cell. And she said, Bari, your mom doesn't look right. Now, at this point, right before this, I had tried calling my mom twice on her 2 days in a row on her cell phone and could not get in touch with her. And I had called the nurses and said, look, I can't get in touch with my mom for 2 days. Something's wrong. And they said, oh, well, Bari, last night, she was quite belligerent. And it took several of us to get her in bed and we had to put her on oxygen. Well, my mom was never on oxygen. And when I questioned, why didn't anybody call me? Because they would call me if my mom got a scratch. Nobody could give me an answer. And so then this person who works there calls me from her cell and is telling me, Bari, she doesn't recognize me. What do you mean she doesn't recognize you? She doesn't know who I am and she's gray. And I'm afraid she's going to die here. I said, what? She said, look, we're trying to get special permission for you to come up here. If we can get it, will you come up? I said, absolutely. I'm on my way. So they got special permission for me to come up. They took my temperature, mask. I was already wearing one. But they made sure that I had everything. I go into her room, and my mom, who is this strong, independent woman who a couple weeks prior is laughing about COVID, is now not able to hold a styrofoam cup with water and is spilling it all over herself.
Mm.
Is now trying to eat a half a bagel and take bites, and it's falling out of her mouth. And I'm breaking off pieces to try to feed her. And my mom, who, again, is only there because of mobility issues. When I'm saying to her in front of the nurses, Ma, you should probably go to the hospital. I know, go. My mom didn't talk that way.
Oh.
So she's not speaking clearly. She's just not my mom.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm there for a nice chunk of time. And I ran out to Wawa to grab a cup of coffee. If I was gone 10 minutes, it was a lot. I come back and my mom looks confused. I said, Mom, and she's looking at me confused as if to say, what are you doing here? And I said, you don't remember me being here with you all morning? And she's just looking at me and shaking her head. You don't remember me giving you sips of water, feeding you bites of bagel? And she's confused. So I said to the nurse, we're done. We're out. You want me to call the doctor? No, we're out. We're done. Call 911.
Yeah.
They call 911. EMTs show up in full PPE, as if they're waiting for the Martians to land. And they take her temperature, and one looks at the other, and then they look at me, and she's running a fever. She's spiking a temperature. And I ask if I can ride with them, and they tell me no. And I follow them to the hospital. They take her through emergency, and I am now told to wait in my car till a determination can be made.
Oh.
And I go into the emergency room, and they're telling me, you can't be here. I said, look, that's my mom. That's all I have left. Here's my cell. I'm in the parking lot. I need to know what's happening. And they said that they're still examining her, and they have my cell, but they're still making a determination. It was the longest 20 minutes of my life sitting in that parking lot. And then I went and called, and they told me that I didn't live that far. I could go home, but she had sepsis, she had pneumonia, and she had COVID.
Oh.
And
Wow.
yeah, and they were keeping her. She was kept in, because there were no more beds, she was kept in the emergency room for 2 days. So that was a Wednesday and a Thursday. I had her cell phone. On Friday, she called me. They had a bed for her. She called me and told me she was coming home. I said, Mom, because of her situation, she did not realize what she was saying.
Yeah.
And I said, Mom, you're not coming home. You have COVID. No. I spoke with the doctors. I'm fine. I can come home. And I said, Mom, you have sepsis. You have pneumonia. You have COVID. You're not able to come home. Oh, you're leaving me here just like you left me in the nursing home. And she hung up on me.
Mm.
And I kind of just was left to stare at a phone. Saturday and Sunday, she was back to talking to me like my mother and had no recollection of the conversation on Friday at all, and acted just like my mom, like perfectly normal. Monday, I get a phone call that I need to hurry up to the hospital. This is it. She's not doing well. So I leave work. Now, my mom had a living will. And so she was never on a vent, never needed a vent.
Mm-hmm.
So I go running up to the hospital, and she was on a BiPAP, which is similar to a CPAP machine. And I go running up there, and they're telling me I need to make a decision on my mom. And I'm there, and I said, I'm not making any decision till I see my mom. Now, the floor she was on had been a heart floor that they had converted to a COVID floor. So there was a small window where they would normally put like a heart monitor. And that was what I was supposed to peer at my mom through. And I said, no, I'm not making any determination on my mom until I see my mom. So after a little bit of a debate, they put me in full PPE and let me go into the room to see my mom. And when I walked into the room with one of my best friends who came as support, who's like a brother to me, she took one look at me, and you'll forgive my language. She said, "What the are you doing here?" And I'm thinking to myself, that's my mom.
Yeah.
Because in her mind, it was, I shouldn't be there. It's not safe for me. And I said, Mom, they told me you weren't doing well. What? Well, nobody told me. You're not hurting? No. You're not having any trouble breathing? No. Are you in any pain? Well, my one leg hurts from the lymphedema, but I'm not getting out of bed, so I'm fine. Okay. You sure you're okay, Mom? I'm fine. Why do you keep asking me that? Okay. And she and I have a normal conversation. Perfectly normal. I'm in there a good half hour, I would say. The nurses got annoyed because I pull out my cell phone. You're contaminating it. I said, and I looked at them like, you think I'm going to listen to this after you told me she's dying? She's fine. I get on my cell phone with my daughter, who at the time was 11. She talks to my daughter through FaceTime. She talks to my mother-in-law. She talks to my 2 dogs. Perfectly fine.
Wow.
And I don't understand this because I'm supposed to be here to make a decision. And from everything I'm seeing, she's fine. There's no decision to be made. I walk out of the room, and the hospitalist says to me, you see? I said, I see what? She's fine. That's my mother. And I go and I call her family doctor who works at that hospital. And I said to him, you tell me what to do. He pulls up her stats. He said, Bari, her heart rate's good, blood pressure's good, respiration's good. I wouldn't do anything. I said, okay, I just need to know. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. That's a Monday. Tuesday, and every day I'm calling every couple hours because that was the only way I could get information. To the point the nurses were saying to me, didn't you just call? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm calling again. I want information. I want to know how she's doing.
Yeah.
Well, nothing's really changed. Okay, that's good. That's all I need to know. What's her stats? And they would give it to me, and okay, great. And I would write it down, and 3-4 hours later, I would call again. So the next day, I'm being told the same thing, that she's not doing well. And, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to believe you because I just saw her the day before. And I'm getting the same report that her stats are the same. Well, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Something's not making sense.
Mm-hmm.
Wednesday, I'm at work and I'm in a Microsoft Teams call with one of my teachers. And I had been in the same call with her on Monday when I got the horrible hurry up and get to the hospital call. So I'm in a call with the same teacher on Wednesday. And I said, the hospital's calling again. She said, well, you better take the call. I said, they probably just want to adjust her meds. I called this morning. She was doing fine. I said, just hold on a minute. And I get a call from a doctor. Hi, Bari. Sorry to tell you, your mom died. What?
Oh,
And I start yelling at him, you can't say that. Take it back. How can you say that? Barry, I'm sorry to tell you, your mom passed away. I already told you, stop saying that. Take it back. But it was just past the soul.
yeah. Yeah. Like it just happened, and here's the news. When you weren't expecting that news at all.
Because I saw her
Yeah.
48 hours before and she was fine. She was having a conversation just like you and I. And that's what I think people don't understand. It's not always the horrific pictures that you see of people on event. It can be, I just had a conversation with someone and then it just happens. The numbers just bottom out and you lose that loved one and you're left with what just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And that's unfortunately the truth of this. You don't know what's going to happen. For me, it was on Monday when I'm being told this news. I had gotten involved with a group called Survivor Corps on Facebook, because when she was diagnosed, like I said, I did not know anybody that had COVID. I didn't know, it had not personally affected me at that time. And a friend of mine said, you need to look into this group. And I had almost 700 total strangers praying for my mom. Look into remdesivir, look into plasma. And I'm asking the doctors at the hospital. And at that point, it was, well, we don't do remdesivir. Your mom doesn't work for the hospital. She's not a hospital worker, so she doesn't qualify for plasma. She's not severe enough. I kept hearing that over and over again. I even had a total stranger who said, find out what blood type your mom is, and I will donate plasma to her. Someone I don't even know.
Yeah.
From this site. So I was trying on Tuesday, trying to get all this information. On Wednesday morning, the day that she passed, before I even knew that this was coming, I was making phone calls trying to get her transferred for 2 hours. And I kept hearing, she's not severe enough. She's not severe enough.
Wow.
And when I pulled up to the hospital after she passed, one of the hospitals called me back and said, we may be able to get her here. And she had already passed at this point. But the concern is that she's not severe enough. We don't know if she'll qualify. I said, you don't know if she'll qualify? I said, well, can I ask you a question? Sure. I said, my mom just passed away. And the woman on the phone, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I said, so if there's anything I can do, because that's the typical response. I said, can you just answer one last question for me? Sure. I said, does she qualify now? And there was no answer. Because it shouldn't matter the status of somebody. It shouldn't matter their not financial status. Everybody should be entitled to medical care.
Yeah.
And my mom didn't qualify. She didn't qualify. I mean, it just, who knows what would have been different had she qualified.
Yeah. Those are the things that we go back and think about. All the what ifs. Yeah. So did you go into the hospital? Were you able to go in and see her after she passed?
I was. So, after I had the conversation with the lady from a different hospital, I went up and, my mom was already gone at that point. And they said I could see her from outside the room again. I said, no, I'm going in. I want to be with my mom. And at that point, I don't think anybody was really going to argue with me. Um, so they put me in full PPE. And my concern when the doctor had called me and, like passed the salt, informed me that my mom had passed away, I said, I just want to know one thing. Tell me that she didn't die alone. I can't tell you that. What do you mean you can't tell me that? Tell me she didn't die alone. Barry, I can't tell you that. I said, you know what? I'm on my way to the hospital. Well, at least give me a chance to get there. I said, you're not even there? I'm on my way. I don't even remember driving to the hospital. But when I got upstairs, there was, and I said I wanted to be with my mom. There was a nurse outside my mom's room, and her name was Minnie. I'll never forget her. And I practice the Jewish faith, as did my mom. And this woman, Minnie, this nurse Minnie, was outside my mom's room. And she said to me, I need to tell you something. I was with your mom when she passed. And I said to her, thank you so much, because I just needed to know that she didn't die alone. And she said to me, but I have to tell you, I'm Catholic, and I prayed over her. And I said, that's okay. God is God, and I'm just glad that someone was there for her. Thank you so much. And the way she said it to me, it was almost like she felt bad to be there praying for my mom, where I was so grateful that somebody was there for my mom, because I think she didn't know what my reaction was going to be, or what anybody's reaction was going to be, where I was just so thankful. And how could anybody not be thankful? And in the midst of this pandemic, I said to her, would it be okay if I gave you a hug? And she just nodded. And here we are on a COVID floor. My mom has passed, and I'm hugging a total stranger to thank her for being there in this horrible time. And I said to her, you are my angel, because I couldn't be there for my mom, but a total stranger was able to be there, was able to show compassion for another human being when I couldn't be there.
Yeah.
And that's what I think gets lost in the midst of this as well, that there are people that are compassionate, that day in and day out have to see this, have to manage their emotions in this unprecedented chaos. And we don't know how to process the loss of our loved ones. They're experiencing this over and over again every day. And then seeing our emotions every day.
Yeah.
And so I just needed to stop and thank her and be grateful to her for what she's doing for my mom, what she did for my mom. And then I went in and saw my mom, and my best friend went with me again, and I just stood there and couldn't even process it. And for me, I needed to take inventory of the room, because I didn't want to forget anything. I wanted to make sure I remembered everything. She's other than my daughter, she's my last immediate family. And for whatever reason, one of my initial thoughts or actions was to grab a blanket and cover her because I didn't want her to be cold. I knew she would do that for me. And so I had to reciprocate that. And, I stroked her cheek and I stroked her hair and I held her hands. And she, at that point, I don't know how fast I drove, but she was still warm at that point. And I felt her go cold. And that was horrible. That was horrible. Um, but I didn't want her to be alone. And I stayed and I prayed over her and I was with her for some time. And there was a pastor that came to the door and he could not come in because my mom passed from COVID. Because even in death, she could still be contagious.
Mm-hmm.
So he stood at the door and said prayers with us. And then my friend kind of was like, okay, we should probably get going. Um, in the Jewish faith, we need to bury immediately. I did not know that I would not be able to do that for my mom. And there were certain things I was not able to do for my mom. Had I known while I was with her in that room, I would have taken care of that. For example, when people say, oh, I know what it's like, you don't know what it's like. Because normally when someone passes, you're able to get their hair done and they're dressed and their makeup's done. I couldn't do any of that for my mom. And my mom, although the service was as beautiful as it could be in these circumstances, she didn't get the dignity that she deserved. She, even in death, was considered contagious. She was not able to have her hair done or her makeup done. And had I known ahead of time, I was with her and I would have done it. I even begged the funeral director. I'm like, let me come in, I'll do it. And we can't. She was buried in her hospital gown. They would not let her be dressed. They let me put clothes in the casket after discussion. I was able to have them put clothes in the casket. She was buried in 2 bags because even in death, she was deemed contagious. Which when people say, oh, I know what it's like to lose someone, you don't know what it's like to lose someone to COVID.
No.
And that was horrific to think that that's how my mom went out, in 2 body bags in a hospital gown. Part of a Jewish service is, that we put dirt on the casket because it's seen as the last good deed you can do for someone is to help bury them. That, they can never repay you. It's an honor to be able to do that for someone. I was not able to fulfill that mitzvah, that good deed. When I looked for the shovel, the larger shovel to help bury my mom, it wasn't there. And the funeral director said to me, you can't do that because they had to put a cement top on top of her and then backhoe the dirt in.
Oh.
Because even in death, she was deemed contagious.
Mm-hmm.
And, with the funeral, and I compare it to a sports game. Imagine that you have 10 seats, 10 tickets. You're a ticket, your partner's a ticket, your child's a ticket, your preacher, reverend, pastor, they're a ticket. You now have 6 seats left.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you giving those 6 seats to in your final days? That's what I had to decide at my mom's funeral. And the funeral director had to be there. So that was a ticket. That was another spot at the funeral. So my own rabbi said that she was going to conduct the service virtually, so that would free up a spot because only 10 people could attend the funeral. So myself, my spouse, my daughter, that was 3. The funeral director made number 4. I had 6 spots left. How do you decide who those 6 spots go to? That's what I had to decide. And that's a horrible way to think of who's important in that person's life, who the 6 most important people are in that person's life. Now, we were able to conduct the funeral through Zoom, and people were able to participate that way. And there were people that were able to participate who never would have been able to come in, because they live in another state or across the country. So that in itself was one positive, if you will, that came out of it. But it made it another stressor in saying goodbye to her, and another unneeded stressor, because I couldn't even grieve properly for her.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, do you feel angry even now, or do you feel like you're working through it or coping in a different way?
I wouldn't say angry. It's a sense of loss. I feel, am I angry that people continue to die from COVID? Absolutely. Absolutely. When my mom passed, there was no vaccine available. So when I see that there's a vaccine that is available, when I see that there's been enough public service announcements, if you will, about wearing a mask, mask mandates, get your vaccine, and people still don't take COVID seriously or still think of it as comparable to the flu.
Yeah.
Or, oh, well, I work out. I have a good immune system. I won't get it. I don't need to wear a mask. I don't need to be vaccinated. I'll be fine. It'll still pass. And still don't take it seriously a year and a half later.
Yeah.
Yes, that makes me angry. Am I don't know that I'm angry that my mom is gone. I have a sense of loss. Do I miss her every day? Absolutely. Am I angry? I don't know that I'm angry, but I'm angry that people are not heeding the warning. And I'm angry when I hear of another death that could have been prevented. That makes me angry. When I see that kids are contracting COVID because somebody wasn't being safe, or when I hear of somebody that's in a hospital on a ventilator because they thought they didn't need to vaccinate and could go to a concert and be unsafe, that makes me angry. And now they're regretting their commentary and their choices. That makes me angry.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions that I ask, so I usually ask it a little later, but since you brought it up and you live in Pennsylvania, and every state's different. So where I'm at, there's mask mandates and social distancing and everything still happening here. Kids wearing masks in schools, there's all of the things happening. But some states are a little bit of the Wild West. How do you feel like Pennsylvania is doing today with what's going on with COVID?
So, depending on where you are in Pennsylvania, there's some people that will follow the directives and some don't. Philadelphia has stricter laws regarding restaurants than other parts of Pennsylvania. Um, you can go to a restaurant in a different county and nobody will be wearing a mask, but yet in Philadelphia, there's mask mandates. So for me, it should be universal. It shouldn't be dependent on what county you're in. It should be universal, because what that does is it hurts businesses. It pins one county against another. And then you have people who go, well, I'm not going to go to X restaurant in this county. I'll go to this county instead. And all it does is make people more angry against the mandate instead of wanting to follow the mandate. So for me, it should just be a universal mandate, regardless of what county, regardless of what state you're in. It needs to be universal. If we're going to get a handle on this, we need to go back to a universal mandate.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that you did, and you mentioned that you reached out to a group when your mom was diagnosed with COVID. After that, you started, I guess a support group is a good way to put it, for people who had lost someone from COVID because you didn't know anybody until your mom. So can you talk about that a little bit and how that's going?
Sure. So when everything was transpiring with my mom, and then she passed, about 2 weeks later, one of the people that had been praying for my mom sent me a message connecting me with another individual. And at first, I wasn't sure why they were connecting me with this individual. I'm thinking, okay, are they trying to sell me something? Just lost my mom, don't really need to get into that. And then I went and connected with the individual, and here, she had just lost her mom to COVID. Going back and forth a couple times, we start direct messaging and find out that there's no support group where I live for people who pass from COVID. No support group, and she's in a totally different state where she lives, because this is at the very beginning, where she lives for people who have passed from COVID. And we're talking a bit, and I said, when somebody is going through cancer, as my mom did initially, there's support groups for that, or other types of illnesses or loss. There's support groups, but there is nothing for COVID. And this gentleman, he chimes in, and he's in another state, and there's nothing by him, and so on and so on. And now we're at like 5-6 of us chatting, and there's nothing, and we're all in different states. So I created a Facebook group called In Loving Memory 19, all one word. And it was for us to connect, for us to find support with each other, for us to have a sense of community, of belonging, to support each other in this horrible time of grief. Because there's people who, there's grief groups, but COVID, as I've shared my story, is a very different type of loss. There's things that happen when someone passes from COVID that is unlike other types of loss. You may not be able to see your loved one. It could be fast. It might be drawn out. And there's, whether it was quickly or not, there's still this connection that we have. We understand what the other person has gone through, because emotionally, even though they may have COVID, there's this connection that we have. We understand that it's still, at the end, is you have this false sense of hope. The numbers, you think they're going to be okay. And then all of a sudden, they're not. And you're left with, how could this have happened to my loved one? Whether it's a brother, a sister, a mom, a dad, a friend, a grandparent, a child. You're left with this, the remnants of this reality of your emotions. And where do you go from here? Because it's so different. And so that's what In Loving Memory 19 is about. It's about this connection, this unfortunate connection, this unfortunate community that we have, of understanding each other, of understanding what the grief is, what the loss is. But it's more than that, because our loved ones are such a part of our lives. And, maybe this person took you to your doctor's appointments and they're not there now. Or how many times you go to call your mom to share something and you can't now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's those moments that we can now understand. We can connect with each other, and we understand what that feeling is like on a different level, because it happened in such a unique manner. And that's what In Loving Memory 19 is about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about this family that we created. It's a smaller group, but it's looking out for each other. We meet on Tuesday nights through Zoom. And even though it's a Zoom call, during the week, we're texting each other, checking in on each other, just even through our day-to-day things, just making sure we're okay. That, if we know somebody's having a difficult time, or an anniversary's coming up, or maybe it's a birthday and mom would normally call you on your birthday, checking in, letting the person know, we're thinking about you. We know this is going to be a difficult day for you.
Mm-hmm.
Letting them know somebody's there. They understand, and we're here for you.
Yeah. How was the anniversary of your mom's death for you, and leading up to it, and the days leading up to it? Did you relive it, re-experience it? How did it affect you?
It was difficult in the respect of trying to figure out how I was going to acknowledge the passing of my mom.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was such an emotional component to it. And what was I going to do with that? What was the best way? Because I didn't feel that she had the funeral that she should. And on the 1-year mark, how was I going to best recognize the significance of what happened? And was I going to dwell on the negativity, or did I want to showcase the positive of her life? And that's, leading up to it, that's what I kept dwelling on. Like, what am I going to focus? What's going to be my focus? So having a daughter who was very close to my mom, who still is having a very difficult time trying to understand this, because when I came home from the hospital that day after my mom had passed, and I said, Joss, I have to talk to you. And she called my mom Babo, because when she was little, she couldn't say the Yiddish word for bubby. So she called her Babo. And I came home and I was like, Joss, I have to talk to you about Babo. Oh, I know, you want me to FaceTime with her again. And I had to look at her and I was like, Jocelyn, no. And then I had to tell her, and she, bewildered, looked at me and broke. Because as much as adults, we can't process this, the children can't process this.
Yeah.
And, when the anniversary day came, it was, okay, how am I going to handle this? But how is my daughter going to handle this? So did I have my moment? Absolutely. But I decided I needed to focus on her life, on the positives of my mom's life, and make it a meaningful day. So what I did is I had sat with my daughter and we did memories of my mom and all her funny sayings, like COVID schmovid, like, when she was in the nursing home, she loved Moose Tracks ice cream. And so if we went out to dinner, they had a restaurant downstairs and she would want Moose Tracks ice cream. And they would always, we're out of it. I know the third floor has it. Go get Moose Tracks. So just reliving memories of her at the apartment with my daughter, and just sitting there and recollecting and sharing stories, because physically she's not here, but she's here. And our loved ones are here as long as we share stories and share those moments and share those memories. That's how we're going to keep them from disappearing.
Yeah.
That's how we keep them alive, is by sharing those moments and making sure that they're not forgotten, that they're not just a number.
Yeah.
And so I sat there and we called them Boboisms, and we sat there and we're building upon it when we think of something and her favorite foods and stories about her. And then we went and, did we go to the cemetery? Yes. And we brought some M&Ms and we sprinkled some M&Ms because my mom loved M&Ms. And, we tried to make it a day that, although it was sad to think that a year's time had passed, we wanted to make it so that it was meaningful to us, and it was a way to share in her life. Make it something memorable, make it something that was pure and something that was good. And although it was a sad day, it wasn't a depressing moment. It was this is who she is. This is what I want to remember about my mom.
Yeah. And now you're able to help people go through those days like that with your support group. So, because I'm sure we're going to be losing people to COVID for a lot longer. I think a lot longer than we originally thought when all of this started, but definitely for a lot longer. And so as you're going through these things and you have the support group and you have people joining, you're able to be there for them in such an incredible way to help them through all this.
And that was why I had to create In Loving Memory 19. And that's why, I go to memorials and try to participate in as many of them as possible, because I want to make sure that not only my mom, and I make sure that my mom is recognized, but other people that are in the support group their loved ones are recognized.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody joins the support group, we take them into our hearts as if they're our own family. So we always ask them to bring a picture of their loved one, and if they're comfortable, to share a little bit about them, and when they're comfortable, their story of what happened, if
Yeah.
they're comfortable. But to share a story about the person that passed and
Yeah.
what their name is, because they're not a number. My mom's not their number 1,200. Like, that's not who my mom is. My mom is Rose Phillips. That's my mom.
Yeah.
She's not number what have you that passed from COVID. COVID is part of her story, but that's not all she is. And that's what we need to make sure, is that we're telling their stories and telling who they are. And that way we keep their memories alive. When we go on in Loving Memory 19 in our groups and in our chats, and we're sharing stories about, oh, the time my dad took me fishing, and, oh, I remember when my husband and I went to this dinner. We're keeping their memories alive. My
Mm-hmm.
sister and I went down the shore. This was our favorite place. We're keeping their memories alive. We need to keep those stories out there. We need to share those moments.
Mm-hmm.
It's important,
Yeah.
because people need to know they're not just COVID, and they need to know the good deeds they did, and they need to know what they did for their community, and who they were, and why they're important to remember.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you go to the Flag Memorial in DC?
I did. I was there
Oh.
for the closing ceremony.
Oh.
I was there last weekend, and it was remarkable. It was unbelievable. To quote my daughter, as we pulled up, "Mommy, is that a river?"
Oh.
Because when you drove past all those flags waving in the breeze, it looked like a river.
Wow.
Until we parked our car and we got out, and then you realize that's not a river. That's a COVID sea,
Mm-hmm.
a sea of lives lost. And each flag is one life. And walking up, and it's one thing to see it on TV or a picture of it, but when you actually walk up and you see that, or see any of the memorials, it gives you a deeper appreciation for the amount of lives that are lost,
Yeah.
for what is happening in our country, what can be prevented, and for the number and the names. It's we look at the number and we say, okay, the number's increasing, but until you go to a memorial and you see the individual names with dates next to it, or pictures, you can't appreciate the enormity of it all.
Yeah.
It's overpowering. It just, it's unbelievably powerful. Seeing my mom's flag literally brought me to my knees and made me relive that moment of loss again, because it's, do I know my mom has passed from COVID? Absolutely. I feel it every day. But seeing her flag in this sea of over 700,000 flags,
Yeah.
that she's just one of the lives lost, is, I don't know what the words are, but it hits you so hard. And then to find some of the loved ones from the support group their flags, and then seeing flags of people that I don't even know or don't even know their loved ones, but reading the flags and just getting a glimpse into their lives in a 10-second blip.
Yeah.
It's painful. It's painful.
Yeah, I sent my mom's name in probably a week after it started when I learned about it. And I checked every few days, and they updated with her obituary and the extra story that I wrote in about her. But when they sent me the email with the flag and where it was, and I got to see it, I just broke down. And I'm, 3,000 miles away. And it just hit me all over again. And I wasn't expecting that her flag out there marked and where it was with all these other flags would be so emotional for me. But I do think it's important that we don't forget who they were, and that they're people. They were people. They're our loved ones. And we don't want them to be forgotten in just this whole, I guess, past the salt, where it just becomes normal, where it just becomes just part of every day that people are dying and the numbers are going up. I don't like it. It's hard to make peace with that. So lastly, I want to ask you, what do you say to people who tell you that COVID isn't real?
My mom was real. My mom is real. So COVID is very much real because my mom is real. And, it's hard for me to use the past tense with her because she is real. She's still here. As long as I keep her memory alive and share her story, she's real. As long as people share the stories of their loved ones, they're real. They're still here. Like we do it in Loving Memory 19, and we do it other support groups that I'm involved with as well. We have to keep their memory alive because that's where those kind of comments come from. COVID's not real. Really? So all these people that passed away, they weren't real. They weren't real people. Their loved ones that are grieving, they're not real.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people like to ask, like, well, what else was wrong with them, in order to think like, okay, well, I don't have that, so it's not going to happen to me. And I mean, it's completely unfair. My mom had Alzheimer's and was on some medication, but if she hadn't gotten COVID, she would be in her memory care, probably still dancing around at music hour and, having a good time. Because that's what my mom used to have a lot of funny one-liners because she didn't have a lot of memories left. So she had these things that she would say that would make you laugh. My mom's was "say la shits." That was what my mom would say. She'd shrug her shoulders when she couldn't remember something and just say "say la shits."
That's funny.
Yes, but those are the things that I love to talk about, and I love hearing those kind of stories from other people, because that's when we laugh and we remember them in a happy way, in the way that they were when they were alive.
And that's what's important. And it's, for me, it's making sure those memories are not forgotten. People who go, oh, well, it's just like the flu, or in the case of your mom and my mom, oh, well, they must have had a pre-existing condition. And I hate to be this crass, but if somebody passes from cancer, or, you don't go, oh my gosh, they passed from cancer. Well, what other condition did they have? You don't ask that. You go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that. You don't say, oh, well, what other pre-existing condition did they have?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't cross anybody else's mouth.
Yeah.
But with this, why?
Yeah.
For what reason?
Yeah. That is the question.
And we need to stop looking at that. The other thing is, oh, well, was COVID number one on their death certificate? What else was on their death certificate? COVID really wasn't on their death certificate. Why do I have to prove what was on my mother's death certificate? Do you do that to other people?
No.
You don't. You don't go to somebody else when somebody passes and go, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that so-and-so passed. Well, what's on their death certificate? You wouldn't dream of doing that to somebody else.
No. That's a good
But
point.
with somebody that passes to COVID, well, did they really die from COVID? Well, is that on their death certificate? I couldn't even imagine asking somebody that.
Yeah.
And this is the horrors, and this is why COVID support groups are so different than other support groups, because you wouldn't dream of asking somebody else that.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a, how dare you? How could you? But yet we do this to other people. COVID has become politicized.
Yes, very much so.
But yet, you walk by a memorial, say for breast cancer. I'll just use that because of my mom. You wouldn't politicize that. It would be, oh my goodness, there's a breast cancer memorial.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know someone in my family that has breast cancer. People would remark in that manner. Some people, when they see a COVID memorial, feel a need to respond negatively. Oh, aren't you done with this yet? Haven't you had your 15 minutes of fame? Isn't it enough? Why?
Yeah.
Why is one death have more merit than another?
Yeah.
Isn't a life lost a life lost? At what point did we stop being a caring community and stop caring about each other as individuals?
Yeah.
And stop looking out for our community?
Yeah. You're asking all the questions I ask myself every day. I don't know. Our isolation has been more than physical isolation. We're very separated from people who think differently or feel differently or have different political beliefs. And I think that's part of it, is we've just become so one side or the other side. And there's no in the middle where there's just care and community, like you said.
And it just, to me, regardless of political boundaries, political lines, if somebody's hurting, if somebody has lost a loved one, at what point do we just go, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're hurting. I'm sorry that you lost a brother, sister, friend, etc.
Yeah.
And show compassion for each other.
Mm-hmm.
At what point do we get back to that point?
Yeah. I'm glad that you have this support group, and I'm glad that you've started it, and have kept it going for over a year. It's wonderful that you're doing that for people and helping so many people. So you're on Facebook in Loving Memory 19, and then on Instagram at the same.
Yes, it's underscore in Loving Memory 19.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been together about a year and a half, and we like I said, we get together Tuesday nights, 9:00. Sometimes people log on later. There's no penalty if you can't get on at 9. It's not like school where, oh no, I can't get on at 9. It's, we get on, we support each other, and it genuinely is that sense of community that I'm talking about,
Mm-hmm.
that just showing compassion for each other. If we know somebody has to go to the doctors or what have you, it's, we might text each other during the week. Hey, how'd your doctor's appointment go? Are you okay? Just doing a check-in. Do you need anything? Do you need a ride? because we know we're all vaccinated.
Yeah.
And just making sure that we're all okay. Do you need anything? Do you need a meal? Do you just that sense of community that seems to have gotten lost?
Yes.
And just making sure that we're looking out for each other, that we're doing a check-in, not only just emotionally with regard to COVID, but just like I said earlier, those things that, the person that has passed would have been there to support us with. We try to support each other and make sure that as best as we can, we're there for each other.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you sharing all this information and talking about your mom and everything that you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I appreciate it.
And that's the show, everyone. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. If you like this episode, please share the show. Share it with your friends, share it on your social media, and once you've done that, rate and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. And then go rate it on Apple Podcast, because that's where most of our new listeners come from. Ratings and reviews are the main way this podcast finds new listeners. So please share the show. Until next time.